welcome to the Stoa. Today we have Bernardo Kastrup with us on a session called The Daemon Knows. As people at the Stoa know, this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, but today's MC will have my good friend Khalil Martin, as Khalil is more familiar with Bernardo's work than I am. So I'll tag in Khalil now, who will introduce Bernardo and the protocols for today's session. So you're up, Khalil.
Hi, welcome everyone. I just want to thank Peter for making this happen. It's not every day that you get to chat with someone who's a little module in your mind at this point, who's influenced my thinking and my life a lot. I say that in all earnestness. And thank you, Bernardo, for coming here today.
My pleasure. An honor to be here.
So this is how it's going to work. I'm just going to have a chat with Bernardo about the topic of the Daemon. And throughout, you can put your questions in the chat. This will be recorded. This session will be recorded. So if you don't want to be on YouTube or anywhere else, please indicate by your question that you'd like me to read it if you want me to read it, or afterward I'll call on you and you can read your own question. But first, we're just going to have a 30-minute chat. So Bernardo, I don't think a lot of people here are probably new to the Stoa. You're fans and you're followers. But I guess I'll just give you a brief introduction. Bernardo is a philosopher and computer engineer, a founder of the Essentia Foundation that promotes the ideas around analytical idealism. He's a former employee at CERN and a former business executive at one of the largest hardware companies in Europe and the world. And hopefully his Daemon brought him here today. But yeah, so I guess how should we start this? I guess if you want to give a brief introduction of analytical idealism, I'm pretty sure most people already know.
No, it's okay. The only thing I want to do, I want to mildly correct you on the one thing. I didn't found Essentia Foundation. I am the director of Essentia Foundation, but it was founded by Fred Matzer, who deserves all the credits, not only for founding it, but for getting me there, not thanks to me, but despite me. He got me there. So the credits are for him. Essentia Foundation is his child, and I'm just a sort of a caretaker.
Okay, thank you for that correction. In the spirit of giving credit, we do check-ins here at the Stoa, and so like check in to see how everyone's feeling when we start the session. And I feel a little bit nervous, I have to admit. And at times like these, I like to remember what you said to one of your past interviewers or conversationalists. You said, don't take yourself too seriously. Take life seriously, but not yourself too seriously. And that's like followed me. I say that all the time to people, and I should give you credit specifically, which I'll start doing, but it's such a great consolation. So thank you for that.
My pleasure.
Okay, so the Daemon. What is your interpretation of Daemon? I've heard you speak about this with Kurt Jaimungal a little bit. In your book, The Idea of the World, you don't really talk about Daemon specifically. You talk about an internal other sometimes. And of course, you talk about mind at large acting through the illusion of self. But what does Daemon mean to you?
Yeah, I don't talk about it in The Idea of the World, because that is a book, a rigorous book of analytic philosophy. And in analytic philosophy, everything you say, there has to be a very explicit and unambiguous conceptual definition for the words you use. And with the Daemon, that's impossible to do. The Daemon, as Patrick Harpur says, the Daemon is a shapeshifter. You can never pin it down completely. So if you would ask me what is the Daemon for you, I could say it's a metaphor, but I probably mean by it something more than a metaphor. But okay, let's stick to a metaphor. It's a metaphor for a aspect of one's mind that one does not identify with. So you don't think of it as you, in the way you don't think of the part of your mind that generates your dreams as you. It seems like you are experiencing your dreams as something arranged by something else. It's an external reality while you're dreaming, but it's your mind doing that. So in a similar way, the daimon is a part of your mind that seems to be sort of autonomous. Some characteristics it has really sort of frame it as something different from you, because the daimon doesn't give a damn about your well-being, for instance, at least not mine. Maybe some people have more friendly daimons, but mine doesn't give a damn about my well-being, whether I will be happy or not, safe or not, cozy or not. It doesn't care. It has a sort of an instinctive agenda. It's like a force of nature. It's like a storm or a volcanic eruption. It's not something that deliberates and weighs the pros and cons and comes down to a rational conclusion based on a number of steps of logic. That's not how it operates. The daimon feels is perhaps better than the daimon knows. The daimon feels what nature wants to do through you. It is nature wanting something through you. And yeah, it differs from person to person. Socrates described his daimon as never telling him what to do, only telling him what not to do. So the daimon was a sort of a alien voice in his head that would say, "Oh no, don't do this now," or no, don't say this now, don't go there. And the daimon didn't tell him to stop when he chose to not defend himself at his trial and accept the death sentence, which sort of reassured Socrates very much at the end, because he thought, I'll stick to my guns. I know I'm going to die, but I'll stick to my guns. And then he reported to his friends when he was taking the poison that the daimon didn't stop him. So he was sure that he did the right thing. My daimon is different. My daimon has a very clear, positive sense of direction. It tells me what I have to do. And if I don't do it, I get punished severely by my own inner state. But of course, now we are talking about the daimon as something separate, which I think is helpful. Jung himself mentioned that it could be helpful to sort of exteriorize the daimon, because it would give you more moral ground. It would prevent you from having to take responsibility for a force of nature that it's not really in your ego. So why would you take responsibility for that? It's useful to exteriorize the daimon. And that comes from Jung, and the guy who talked about individuation, the integration of all the psyche. So that's how I prefer to see it. It helps me because it becomes a sort of negotiation between me and an impersonal force that tries to act through me. And I try to negotiate for my own safety, my own comfort, the best way I can. Other people would not experience the daimon as so separate, or they would refuse to do that, even if that was there were a possibility. They would try to integrate it and take full responsibility for it. It's possible too, and those people would probably find it strange that I'm talking about it as an exterior force. But for me, through my own intent, I keep it exteriorized. It helps me.
Wow, interesting. That's a great clarification. So yeah, because I always interpreted the daimon like when how I've interpreted it as it's always a good thing to listen to it. But now you're telling me that it's something you have to negotiate with. It punishes you. It doesn't care too much about your well-being. I'm wondering
Yeah.
if the Daemon surfing the path, if there's a too much and opening the valve too much or keeping it too shut, who are good examples of people who are too Daemon inspired? Like, would Nietzsche be an example of that, or like, how is that even a type of person? Someone who obeys a Daemon too much? Is that a thing?
Of course they exist, and it can be for positive or for negative. people who surrender their ego completely are basically going along with the daimon, but they have a positive daimon. Gandhi, Hitler did the bidding of his daimon, never resisted it, never applied his own moral discernment, his own moral judgment. And look, the daimon is not a force for good only. The daimon is a force of nature. It is very, very morally ambiguous. You could even say morally neutral. Morals, ethics, that's something that we derive out of our ability to reflect. We derive from our metacognition. Animals, lower animals, don't have morals. A lion will eat a gazelle alive over hours and basically torture that animal if it doesn't manage to kill it quickly. It will just eat. It's morally ambiguous and neutral. Ethics and morals don't exist in raw nature. It's something that we evolved to develop and apply. So to let yourself be at the mercy of the daimon completely is a very, very dangerous thing to do. It can kill you, or it can motivate you to do horrible things. Again, it's like a storm. You're not going to blame the storm or a tornado because it killed half a village. It's just a force of nature. It doesn't understand better than that. You should regard the daimon the same way. I think it's our ego's moral responsibility to negotiate with the daimon, because as I said, the daimon has no concept of your own personal safety. It regards you and the rest of nature as a tool. It's a psychic, it's a transpersonal psychic force that is literally nature. And it is not reflective, it's not deliberating, it's not thinking things through, it's not passing moral judgment, it's just going the way it goes because it is what it is. And you ought to use your ego. It's not a useless thing. You ought to use your ego to make sure that you continue to exist, that you don't just screw yourself up to the point that you either die or you go live under a bridge and then you're incapable to do anything for the daimon. So the responsibility for maintaining the safety of the tool and the effectiveness of the tool, which is what you are, lies with the tool. The daimon is not going to do tool maintenance, if you know what I mean. So you have to do that. You also have to use, I think this is all my positions based on my own experience, my own life, my own philosophy, my own dispositions. They're not the absolute truth, but it's how I see it. You have to constantly engage in negotiation with the daimon, not only to preserve the tool, to preserve yourself, but also to put certain limits on what the daimon wants to do and where it wants to go. If your moral judgment says, no, there I shall not go, then it is your moral responsibility to say, I ain't doing it. And will you pay the price for it? So you bet you're going to pay the price for it. Because again, the daimon is a storm, it's a volcano. And when it wants to erupt, if you don't let it erupt and you sit on top of it, it's going to blow inside you and you're going to pay the price for it. But it is our moral responsibility to do so, I think. So you cannot just surrender completely to the daimon. Now, to ignore the daimon is equally bad, because then nature is not going to do through you what it needs to do through you. So that sort of begins to empty out the meaning of your life, because the plans of your egos are just little egoic fantasies. They ultimately have very little meaning. They are not participative. They are not going with the grand flow of nature. So you're not going to be part of the bigger scheme. You're just isolating yourself in a corner of irrelevance. So to not listen to the daimon is bad in that sense. And it's also bad because, again, you pay the price. You're going against a very strong force of nature. And if you do that, at some point, you will succumb to depression, anxiety, illness, if you begin to somatize those things. It's a sort of a rejection of a very big and important part of yourself. You're trying to amputate the root of your being, that which connects you to the rest of nature, and that can never be healthy. So that's bad too. So my stance is negotiate and always apply your own moral discernment, because you are the only party that can do that. You are the only one that your ego is the only one which can reflect and pass moral judgment. The daimon cannot. The rest of nature cannot. So you are it. You ought to use that ability and honor it and use that in your negotiation with the daimon. You have to put limits to where it wants to go and to what it wants to do with you. Because at the end of the day, you need a roof above your head. You need to be able to eat. So if the daimon says, quit your job and just do this and nothing else in your life, yeah, you end up under the bridge and then you cannot do anything for the daimon either. So it's important to find a middle ground there.
Okay, wow. Okay, my head is going in so many different directions. But I want to ask you, you spoke about sometimes the daemon seems like it's too powerful to negotiate with. Like you spoke about how Bernardo Kastrup wanted to be a business exec. He wanted to do this, he wanted to have that. And for the longest while, that's what Bernardo Kastrup was doing. But the daemon didn't give up. It seemed like the daemon didn't want to be negotiated with, or maybe it wasn't being listened to enough, so that it accumulated over time. I wonder if you can go through that experience again.
It never wants to negotiate, but it will if it must. You can, I mean, keep in mind, ultimately, we are talking about a negotiation between parts of yourself. But that self that you are is not only your personal self. There's a part of you that sort of spreads down the soil through roots that connect with the rest of nature. So ultimately, it's you talking to yourself, but not you talking to another ego. It's your ego talking to something that is not your ego. Um, the daimon will never negotiate willingly. It's not that kind of force. It's not something to be reasoned with, and or it can actually it can be reasoned with, but it's not reasonable. It's not reflective. So the initiative to engage in compromise is always from the ego's side, and the daimon is never happy when the ego does this. But if the ego does this, there's at least one thing that happens that creates a space that the daimon recognizes. And the thing that happens is the following. If the ego wants to negotiate, it means it accepts the existence of the daimon. And that's an enormous step that the vast majority of people don't take, because they have no clue that this is going on. They have no clue that there is somebody else home. There is another force inside you that isn't really the you see in the mirror. It isn't really interested in your own agenda and your safety and your comfort. It doesn't care about any of that. So the fact that the ego says, let's negotiate, already signals, I recognize that you are there. And I will give you space. I'm not going to amputate you, neglect you, or even ignore your existence, or even pretend that you don't exist. And which is what happens most of the time. And when it happens, when the daimon is not even seen, when people conclude with absolute certainty that it's not there, that it's just some story by some crazy Dutch guy or by some crazy Greek philosopher, when they do that, then things get dangerous, because nature doesn't change because you don't understand it or because you don't see it. Nature will still operate. That volcano, that storm will be there inside you, but because it's being ignored, it will bite your butt when you least expect, and it will cause illness, psychic illness, even bodily illness. So it's already a tremendous step forward that you're willing to negotiate. You don't need to go any further. My experience is that ultimately the daimon sort of appreciates that it's being recognized as agency, as something that exists, and shouldn't be ignored, that should get its time under the sun. It appreciates that. So it will negotiate, but the initiative has to be from the ego. Otherwise, it would just roll over you like a tractor and not even look behind. And once you're dead, it will find somebody else to do its bidding.
So, okay, so maybe this is a dumb question, but do you think most people are following the daemon too much or not enough,
And
or
most people don't
it's
even
just
know
like,
it's there. Most people don't even.
and does that affect your ability to does it have to be a conscious thing? It's like, okay, I
Yeah,
recognize this as a separate.
sure. I mean, there are more than 100 people listening to us now. I bet with you a significant percentage of them are wondering, what is he talking about? What is it that he's talking about? I've never seen this daemon. And so to even see the daemon, you need to sort of sharpen your vision. And what I call vision here is your ability to introspect. You have to sharpen your hearing about what's happening inside until you realize that you are not the only inhabitant of the house. There is somebody else inside. And it is non-trivial. Once you sort of develop the ability to introspect finally and finally, not finally, with finesse, such that you grasp internal subtleties and nuances, and you sort of feel more the ebb and flow of what's happening within you, how the flow of your own willing sometimes is not your own at all. Um, that takes some refinement of introspection to see that a lot of people don't have, and it's not their fault. It's the fault of the culture. We have a culture that says there is no reality inside, it's all outside. So people don't develop the senses to discern the ebb and flow of the inner will, and to recognize what part of it is you and what part of it isn't you at all. And that's important because you see, although the daemon is alien, it's not alien in the sense that you need to perceive it with your eyes or your ears, your literal eyes and ears. Um, the only way for you to take notice of the daemon is to feel what it feels, is to think what it thinks. Telepathy, if you will. But we are conditioned to think that whatever we think is ours. Whatever we feel is ours. It's us. And it takes a certain finesse of introspection until you realize that a lot of those waves of willing are not yours. You feel it, but it's a form of telepathy, if you know what I mean. You are feeling the will of something that isn't your ego and doesn't give a damn about your personal safety or comfort. It's very difficult to do that.
Excellent, excellent. So, yeah, I want to talk to you about. I want to know how this is related to childhood and relegare, reconnection. Yeah, let me try to prod you a little bit more. This. So you spoke about the experience you had as a child growing up in like I think a wooded area, forested area in Brazil, and that really resonated with me because I grew up in Trinidad, and I spent a lot of time outdoors. And when I can recall having that voice stronger in my head back then, and it seems to be something that is related. You can hear during childhood more. I don't know if that's true for you or not, and I want to know if that's related to this idea of reconnection, religare.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I was born in Rio, which is a very, very urban city, urbanized city. But my grandfather had a property outside town, which was a pretty large chunk of the Atlantic forest. And I certainly felt connected to that. I loved that place. It was, it was the reason to like the weekend was to go out of town with my father and mother and go to that place. Um, if the daimon is a consequence of the formation of the ego, in the sense that it's the egoic boundary that separates the daimon from what you identify as yourself. Without an ego boundary, uh, you would be the daimon in the sense that there would be no personal self. You're just the one subjectivity field that spans all nature. So the daimon only exists insofar as the ego has evolved enough to be differentiated and to recognize itself as a separate agent. In many preliterate cultures, the ego doesn't form. It forms only as far as it needs to form for you to know to which mouth to bring the food. But there is still the mind that reigns, the field of subjectivity that reigns is still a collective field that spans into the original environment, into the jungle in South America, or the desert in Australia, or the ice for the Inuits. So in that sense, you will never hear those people talk much about the daimon. They would talk about spirits, which is what pops up when the ego begins to form, but it's not very strong yet. So there are spirits, but if you really talk to them, you see that the spirits are not very separate from them. It's just artifacts of language or even translation sometimes. So in a field of deep integration and very loose ego boundaries, there is no daimon. There is just what is. There is just nature, or there is very little daimon, the spirits of the forest. We hear talk of the daimon at the very birth of Western culture with Socrates. Well, you could say, the pre-Socratics were the birth of Western culture, Parmenides, Empedocles, but that was one generation before only. So we hear the word daimon at the birth of Western culture, at the birth of the Western ego. Socrates, as written about by Plato, who was then followed, well, never mind. But the idea of the daimon is an implication, a consequence of the formation in Western culture for the first time of a strong ego, a strong sense of personal individuated agency. And then that the rest of the ebb and flow of nature, the rest of the ocean on which the ego is just flowing on top, that becomes the daimon. And that's, again, very morally ambiguous. It's something that you have to negotiate with. You row your little boat, but you better row along with the currents, otherwise you get nowhere.
Wow, this is great stuff. I didn't think we would get this far into new stuff that I'm hearing, but I'm happy. I want to ask you about art. Are you an artistic person? Who are your favorite artists? And do you think art, and even like an artistic lifestyle, or even with just being artful about how you compliment your friends or like do favors for your friends and nice things for your spouse or whatever, how does that relate to the Daemon? Is art related to Daemon? Who are your favorite artists?
Oh, you bet. I mean, my partner is a painter. She paints mostly abstract. She's capable of painting perfect portraits, but most of what she does is abstract. And it's her daimon in action. She doesn't conceptualize it as such, but if you watch her work, she gets into a kind of flow, and you see that her ego has absolutely no control. The ego almost dissolved away as she's doing her brush strokes. She paints with her hands as well. I got her to wear gloves just to prevent whatever chemical contamination. But yeah, that's nature flowing through her, and she picks up that ebb and flow and creates images of it. So yeah, look, the daimon is not um, one of the many parts of life. The daimon is life. It percolates through every aspect of life, through and through everything. Whether you see it or not is irrelevant. Nature is what it is, whether you perceive or understand or accept it or not. It's everywhere. It's coloring culture. It's providing the direction for where civilization is going, even if it is a deadly direction, because again, the diamond is just a force of nature. It's not capable of passing value judgments or capable of deliberation. It's not its business. It's extremely powerful, but it's extremely, as Schopenhauer put it, blind. The will is blind, as Schopenhauer said it, blind in the sense of not being capable of metacognition, of reflection, of pondering, of passing moral judgment, deciding what's good and welcome and what's bad and unwelcome. But it's everywhere. Every aspect of human activity is modulated by it.
See, this is something I have trouble understanding. How is it that you're saying that the daemon and even a belief in analytical idealism as opposed to materialism, for example, has no necessary ethical implications or moral implications. But at the same time, it affects how you move about into the world and how you treat yourself. It seems kind of contradictory to me. Do you get
No,
that question a lot, or?
I don't deny that you can derive an ethics from idealism. Actually, yesterday on the Essential Foundation website, we published an essay that argues precisely this. And not only argues that it can be done, it then goes ahead and does it. So I don't think that's invalid. I don't think that's illegitimate. It can be done. My point was, you don't need to be an idealist in order to derive or at least endorse a pragmatic value system, a pragmatic system of ethics or morals or a social contract. You can do that in the absence of any commitment to any ontology. But if you go for idealism, of course, it has moral implications. Far from me to deny that. They calibrate my actions. So why wouldn't I accept that others do the same?
Bernardo, so yes, ethical, conventions so that we can get along together nicely. But Bernardo, what if we want to create a renaissance? What if we want to have a second axial age? Isn't that a imperative? Isn't that, maybe I'm sounding too naive here, but isn't that positive? Isn't that something worth opening up for? That's,
Of course.
yeah.
Of course it is. I have to be very careful now because it's so easy to misinterpret what I'm about to try to say.
Good.
I'm
kidding.
Look, if our problems could be solved by preaching, they would have been solved in antiquity. They would have been solved in the Dark Ages. They would have been solved at least in the Middle Ages, because there was plenty of preaching. So when we say, let's go change the world, we have to figure out to what extent that's the ego speaking. Especially when that initiative, let's go change the world, when it's morally clean and solid and invulnerable in terms of its ethical and moral grounding, it's an ego thing, because again, only the ego can pass moral judgment. I'm not saying that the ego is bad. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing because it's an ego thing. I'm just saying this is a sense of direction and a plan that is engendered by the ego. And it may be very good, and it may be what we need. But if it doesn't have the backing of nature, the backing of the daimon, it doesn't have an engine. It points in the right direction, but it doesn't have the energy and the momentum of nature, the momentum of that volcanic eruption to take it forward. And that's why preaching almost always fails. That's why the greatest ideas often fail. The greatest initiatives fail. And then you might go and say, well, but darn, Daemon the diamond should support this because this is good. Well, you know it's good, but the diamond doesn't. The diamond just is. The diamond, again, is the storm. And the storm can wet the fields and produce a great crop, but it can also set the forest on fire and destroy houses. Um, so that's the danger. I think, and the art that we will need to develop, going back to art, the art and sensitivity that we will need to develop has to do with adding something to making a morally solid plan, which can save our lives, can save our civilization. So it's good, but it needs something else. We need to develop the sensitivity to sort of feel the ebb and flow of what's happening right underneath the ego, because that's where the energy and the momentum lie. Perhaps even figure out a way to sort of try to channel that. But all of this depends first and foremost on the recognition that this thing exists, that there is this ebb and flow, this impersonal ebb and flow underlying not only your willing, but the willing of society as a whole. For as long as it's not even recognized, what chance does it have to be perceived? And if it's not perceived, you cannot put it to work for a morally sound goal towards, the plan for saving our civilization. And what is really not helpful about this is this elevation of naivete and childishness in our Western culture, particularly in the US. That's where I feel it the most. This notion that it's good to be innocent, it's good to be naive, it's good to be immature, because you gotta be immature to think I am only good. I stand for the morals. I am a righteous person, and all the evil are those other people. I mean, you gotta be very childish to think that. But what do? Even if people start developing a sensitivity for all the potentials in them and realizing that they have perhaps as much potential for evil as the next guy, when they start perceiving that, they will back away from it because that's not good. It's not good to mature. It's not good to see more, to become wiser, because you gotta be the guy who say, I'm just a good guy. I can't relate to those people in jail. I can't relate to those drug addicts. I can't relate to parents who abandon their children after a divorce. Well, maybe you can't, but that ebb and flow is all there in you. Because what are you? You are one of the flowers of the tree of nature. You arise from nature, and everybody else is another flower. It's all in the same tree. So we need to recognize the moral ambiguity that flows through us and gives us the energy of life that moves us, without which we would just roll up in a fetal position in a corner and die. We have to recognize that that engine power is morally ambiguous, because if you refuse to recognize the other side of that ambiguity, the negative side, because society rewards you for that, if you refuse to recognize that side, then you cannot recognize any of it. You cannot have only one side of the coin. You either don't have the coin or you have the coin. You either see the coin or you don't see the coin. You cannot slice it in two, because the moment you slice it in two, each half will have two sides. So either we accept that we mature and we bite the cultural bullet that this implies. We bite the bullet that some righteous people will say, oh, you're no longer a righteous person because you can relate to evil. Yes, that's what we have to do. That's exactly what we have to do if we don't want evil to take over. We have to bloody relate to evil, not as something outside, but as one of the potentials of nature. Because if we relate to it, now we see the ebb and flow of that energy, and now we can have a mature relationship with it. And then it's not only preaching anymore. Now you're riding the wave. You're not only preaching, go there. No, what can you do? You have to have the energy to get there. You have to ride that wave. And if you refuse to see the wave, you can't ride it.
No, that was very beautiful. That was very good. Well, it was great for this self-illusion to speak to you. There's so many more things I want to talk about, like the aliens in the Pleiades, to the New Age bullshit, to space-time and Hegel. But there's so many questions in the chat, and I have to scroll all the way up. So we're going to go to the Q&A in the chats.
Oh,
In the
there's a
chats right
lot
now.
there. Okay, I'll let
Yeah.
you do that because otherwise.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'll do it. I'll do it. So, Max Goslin, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question.
So what is the difference / relationship between the daemon and the subconscious and shadow, and someone added the id, and how do you communicate with it, or potentially increase the channel of communication?
All these words, some of them are from Jung, some of them are from Freud, like the id, that sort of moral monster that, anyway, all these names are different ways of slicing the cake. The cake is one and the same. We're talking about the same thing, but you can slice it in different ways, and each slice will have a different shape, a different form. But when you put all the slices together, it's the same cake. So, subconscious is a Freudian idea mostly. The unconscious is now mostly associated with Jung, although Freud created the term. The id is purely Freudian. So these are all different ways of slicing the cake we call mind. The ego is another slice of that cake. It's the slice we identify with that we think are us, that personal narrative. I am that person born that day, married to this person, and my profession is this and that. That's the ego narrative. It slices a part of mind and says, I am that. But the thing saying I am that is the whole cake. It's not the ego slice. The daimon is a very, very big slice of that cake. It's a transpersonal cake that you and I are both slices of. And my daimon is a big slice of that cake. You can have a different daimon. You may not be, to speak less metaphorically, you may not be as attuned to a certain aspect of mind, of this transpersonal mind, as I am. But I am not as attuned to another aspect of that transpersonal mind as you are, because we are different expressions of nature, and each expression has its own dispositions, its own resonant frequency, its own harmonics, so to say. So my daimon may be a different slice of that big cake of transpersonal mentation, the mind at large, than your daimon. It's certainly a different slice than my ego or your ego. Now, whatever names we want to give to it are valid within a certain context. It's useful for me most of the time to think in terms of the daimon slice, because that's the best way I have to relate to it in the most productive and safe way possible. But under different circumstances, slicing the cake differently in language can be more useful. For different people, slicing the cake differently can be more useful because it would go along different concepts that they are more receptive to, or which they can understand better. I think it's all okay. I think there is no need for us to write a dictionary, the great taxonomy of mind, and explicitly and unambiguously clarify the relationships across all these concepts. This is something analytic philosophers would do, but here we are talking about human psychology, and human psychology is not a monster that you can pin down under your thumb and say, this is it. No, it's a shape-shifting monster, as Patrick Harpur says. When you think you pinned it down, it already shape-shifted on you, and it's already something else. And accepting this fluid nature of mind, I think, is most conducive to a meaningful life. Even though it's not conducive to analytic philosophy. But again, analytic philosophy is an aspect of our activity as living beings. We don't need to sort of corral everything that is salient about us into that specific scheme of analytic philosophy that demands conceptual clarity and all that. We don't need that. We can go through life in a more fluid and intuitive way, while some of us do analytic philosophy on the side. That's perfectly okay. So slice the cake whichever way resonates best with you and allows you to live the most meaningful life. That's what I would suggest. For me, this diamond slice is very helpful. I can conceptualize things in a fluid but clear enough manner that allows me to sort of negotiate my way through life in a way that is satisfying to me, or at least in a way that I haven't figured out a better way yet.
Okay. So Bernardo, we have like 15 more minutes to the hour. Are you able to stay a little bit longer, or you have a hard stop?
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
We can.
Okay. Okay.
6:45. So 1 hour, 15 minutes more. Would that be okay?
Oh wow. Okay. Peter,
It would
what
be
do you?
8 o'clock for me.
Oh,
And then
okay.
I
Yeah.
should stop.
No. Yeah. Okay. So I want to go with. I'm just picking the questions here that are kind of relevant. I want to go with Laura Cleveland. She got a +1 on her question. Laura, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Although I don't remember which question I got a +1 on, so maybe I'll ask two that I'm curious about, and you can answer whichever you're more interested in. The first was just very practically, how do you negotiate with the daemon? What does that look like for you? What is that process like? And then the second one was just this noting in myself that whenever I feel like some decision has already been made, like I'm already being drawn in a direction or there's something already moving through me, it feels to me like what first happens is actually a somatic sensation, like some kind of inner rising of energy, some kind of flutter, some kind of something, some impulse, and then kind of a more conscious impulse arises, and then a thought, I'm going to do that, or I want to do that. But it often has this mysterious kind of bodily sense. So I was wondering what you thought the relationship between the body and the daemon is. Thank you.
I don't see the body as separate from the mind at all. I think the body is the name we give to what certain processes in mind look like under certain circumstances. It's the image of the mind, like flames are the image of combustion. When combustion is happening, which is a chemical process, electrons flowing from oxygen binding to other atoms, it's an invisible chemical process, but it produces plasma, which you see, which is flame. So flames is what combustion look like. You can have combustion without flames. It's the most dangerous type of combustion because it can burn you to death and you don't see it and nobody else sees it. Certain alcohols burn without flames. But in the same way, dissociated mind looks like a living body. Can you have mind without a body? Of course, you can have combustion without flames. But certain types of combustion produce flames as an image. Certain types of mental activity, which we call life, metabolism, dissociation, look like a body. So I don't see the body as distinct at all. So what you feel in the body actually is what you feel in the mind. It's just that because you can see your body, you can map that feeling geographically to some part of your body, but that's what's going on in mind. And of course, something happens in mind when you are doing the daemon's bidding. You bet. Often it's the feeling of relief, great relief, especially when you finish doing the bidding. In the process of doing the bidding, I personally feel tremendous pressure. The way the daemon shows me the way is that if I'm not on the way, or if I am on the way but I'm not done yet, I feel a overwhelming sense of responsibility, almost paralyzing, but not quite. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to do anything. But it's on the edge of being paralyzing. It sort of mobilizes your entire being, and you have that feeling that there is a tremendous weight on your shoulders, and you must get that done. And you have no clue why. And you have no clue whether it will be useful to anyone, but you have to get that done. That's how I experience it. And if you are not even trying to get that done, then it's a completely overwhelming feeling for me. And your first question, what was your first question again? I forgot what.
Could I just ask a question about that response?
I'm
first?
not the moderator, so Khalil and Peter should
Sure.
tell you.
Thank you. I was just wondering, I guess it has a different sensation, a different bodily sensation. Like I think sometimes when I'm thinking, I do, yeah, there are, and I do agree with this holistic vision of mind and body and heart, but I guess it's more striking to me. Like it really feels like when I'm being moved, there's something like the kind of that lower abdomen, the hara really begins to have this pressure, this energy, this fire that feels, yeah, it's different. So that's interesting to me. But my first question was, how do you negotiate? What does that mean for you?
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. This is something I don't know whether I learned over time or where I just developed the method. I don't know, but I do it in a very, very trivial way. I talk to it in words, in my own mind. I don't need to verbalize it physically, but I I say the words mentally. I literally negotiate with it in words. I present my point of view. I acknowledge the Daemon's point of view, and I invite the Daemon to think with me so we both get something out of that. So I'm not completely crushed and he gets his time under the sun. So I literally talk. I don't know whether it works for other people. For me, it's very helpful. In the way that Jung put it, it gives you more moral space by exteriorizing and just talking to it in words. I'm perfectly aware that I'm talking to myself. But this self in myself is not the ego. It's a broader cake, if you know what I mean. But ultimately, it's the same field of subjectivity. I know the Daemon exists not because I see it at a distance, but because I feel its feelings. I think its thoughts. And I know it's not my ego because those feelings and those thoughts have nothing to do with my well being or my comfort or my little ambitions. So I know they are alien. Uh, but I know the Daemon exists because I feel its thoughts, I feel its feelings. And then I talk to it.
No, thanks. That was great. I think Reid has a similar question, but I'd like to hear more about this. So, Reid, if you want to ask your question.
Sure, thanks. This is all fairly new to me, so I'm kind of trying to get my hands around exactly what's happening here. When you're speaking about the daemon, I feel these embodied flushes where I think I'm resonating with what you're talking about. And I'm feeling like the thing that gets in the way for me is the ego. And so I'm wondering, how do we best come into attunement with the daemon? Is it simply a matter of reducing ego and just allowing the daemon to kind of surface? Or
I
are there
don't
any
think
kind of
so.
specific practices that you do to kind of tune into the daemon?
You know, I'm sort of at the end of a process of accepting myself as a Western mind, because a lot of what I do has so much resonance with Eastern philosophy, Eastern spirituality, and that is a lot associated with the notion that you have to get rid of your ego. And so I sort of flirted with these ideas for a while, like, yeah, the ego is just an illusion. So maybe suffering will stop if I get rid of the ego. And of course, that's the best possible way to reinforce the ego is to go to war with the ego. Then the ego has a field day. But slowly, I'm sort of accepting myself as a Western mind. The way the Western mind has historically dealt with these different aspects of the broader mind is by giving each of them a name and treating them as external figures, like we treat other people being external figures. So I don't think it's necessary for you to weaken your ego. It's not about, actually, to even talk about the daimon, you have to talk about the ego, because if the ego is not there, then neither is the daimon. They are co-defined. If you remove the boundary between them, which is the egoic boundary, then there is just one thing, and it's neither the daimon nor the ego, or it's both. So even to talk about the daimon, even for you to engage in an inner dialogue in which the daimon is a participant, your ego needs to be there to some extent. I think what is much more significant and where we make the fundamental errors is when the ego says, and I am the only inhabitant of my house. Then, then, then you're in for a ride that you have no control of. And you will think it's all you, and you will take pills at some point. So it's okay that you have an ego, so long as the ego acknowledges that there is something else going on. And it is in your house, it's in your home, the sanctum of your own mind, of your own field of subjectivity. But the mainstream metaphysics of our culture, materialism, tends to deny that there is somebody at home. Not completely, even under under the materialist metaphysics, you can have psychic complexes that are dissociated but do exist and have a direct impact on the body. You get to psychosomatic medicine and all that stuff. This is all under materialist premises, and it does leave some space open for the figure of the daimon, but not sufficient space, because the daimon is fundamentally transpersonal. And the space that's left for something other than the ego under materialism is still in the personal domain. And if you do that, then even if you accept that there is somebody else in the house, you will not grant it the space it needs to express itself. And you will be in a morally more difficult position, because all the inhabitants of your house under materialism, their sole concern, their sole agenda is the preservation of your body. And then it becomes difficult to engage in a healthy dialogue with the daimon, because the daimon is not interested in the preservation of your body. It is like, it's the third comma in the final footnote of a very thick book, the preservation of, oh yeah, there is that as well. There is the body, yeah. So under materialism, even though you acknowledge there is somebody else at home, you don't grant that somebody else a fair view of what it is, what its agenda is, and what it represents. You make it small. You make it almost illegitimate. You rob from it its life energy. You rob from it the most important thing that it has, which is its transpersonal agenda. If you try to corral and lock that thing into the home of personal self-interest, it will rebel, because in a sense, you're denying its own identity to it. So you recognize that there is somebody else at home, but you don't recognize, you don't give it recognition of what it actually is. And the end result ends up being the same as if you didn't recognize it at all, as if you denied that, that there is anybody else at home. So I think that's the important thing, not to kill your ego. I don't think the Western disposition requires that. And I think we are looking at truth from another angle. We see another facet of it, in which the ego is a tool. It plays a role. Why would you throw away the bloody tool? But recognize that there is something else, and it is not personal. It is not interested in your individual agenda or in the preservation of your safety and comfort. And you can do that not only despite the ego, but precisely because of the ego. I think that's the important step, not get rid of your ego. I mean, who is getting rid of the ego? It's the ego.
Yeah. So, Oliver actually has a similar question along these lines, and I have a tangential question about what is the telos of this thing. But Oliver, if you want to ask your question.
I had a few questions. I'm not sure which
Oh,
one, but indeed, I
sorry.
had a question about the telos or the aim, because if I understand correct, the dynamic daemon power is always kind of orientated towards some kind of telos which is outside the person, and for me, what's the I think it also has a kind of a artistic expression because of that, because it is aim or goal driven. Could there be creativity without a daemon?
Probably some very insignificant amount of creativity. I don't know. For me, no. I haven't written a single book in my life, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Not one.
So you when you are in a creative process, like the making of a book or the making of an article, you look at yourself from a kind of impersonal standpoint, and is that standpoint then not the standpoint of the daemon looking at the ego making or at the person making a creative expression of itself?
You're looking for a nice conceptual way of sort of lassoing this story and saying, oh, okay, here it is. It's in my hands. I put all my conceptualization around it and I got it. It's more felt than anything else. When I say I never wrote a book, I mean, I produced all the words, but I never thought it out. I mean, the books, I think about the problems that I do. I ask the questions all the time. I've always done it. But when the answer comes, it feels like it came from somewhere else. And I just primed it by asking the questions, by thinking it through very hard. But when the answers come, I feel that they don't come from me, but I do have the job as a tool to dress it in words. And that's where the skill of Bernardo Kastrup comes in play. I have to have the right dictionary, the right experiences, the right references in order to find the right words and the right tone that can disarm people who might not be open to this kind of philosophy because they associate it with New Age woo and that stuff. So the impression I have is that two diamonds were talking to each other and thinking, how are we going to do this? We need someone to do this. And I just happened to walk by, and one of them looked at me and said, oh, that guy has the right words. He has the right conceptual dictionary. Yeah, let's get him. and from that point on, I was enslaved. It's a metaphor. I don't mean this literally, of course, but that's how it feels. So creativity, at least mine, at least the creativity that expresses itself through me is daimonic. 100%. Yeah, maybe a few exceptions. The other day I built another computer. I like to design my own computers from scratch. That's mine. All right, I'll take authorship of that one. As for the books, my publishers require that my name is in it because it makes marketing easier. That's about it.
Interesting. Bernardo, you never said who your favorite artist was, and you're not allowed to say your girlfriend.
She's my favorite living artist.
Okay. And who's your favorite non-living artist? Reassociated artist?
Plastic artist or any kind of artist?
Any kind of artist.
Probably Vivaldi.
Vivaldi. Okay.
Probably. But ask
Sweet.
me this in another day and I'll say some other name.
Okay.
It depends on the time, on the period of my life, what resonates most with me. There was a time I would have said Wagner.
Wagner? Interesting.
Yeah, not long ago.
So mostly music then.
As Schopenhauer said, music is the most primordial expression of the will. Think about it. Why do we like music? It's just air vibration. Has absolutely no use for survival. Why do we like it at all? It's because it mirrors the ebb and flow of what we are. And it's that sympathetic resonance that we describe as I love it. But it has absolutely no survival purpose. It's the kind of thing that why the hell did it evolve? And the answer is it didn't evolve. It's just us resonating with the primordial aspects of ourselves.
Wow, this relates to the mathematical intuition and stuff like that. But so Anjan has he wants to thank you for changing his life, but he also has a question, which I am kind of interested in too. So Anjan, if you want to ask your question.
Yeah, I'm totally fanboying. Bernardo, I was in a really dark place this year, and I guess to make a long story short, I feel like I can only really say this in retrospect, but your work was the beginning of a crack of light in a completely new relationship to the world and myself and to relationships. And it was almost like there was an oppressive nihilism from being like, oh, I figured out how this all works and it sucks. And I feel like you made me into a kid again. Where is this sense of wonder? Wow. What's the big story?
How oppressive narratives can be, and inner narratives, how absolutely oppressive they can be. And you get rid of one of them and bloom, you are back.
And so I just wanted to thank you. I know I can't express it in words, but you really did change my life. And I found out about you through another guy in the Stoa, David Swedlow. So it's kind of cool to see how the circle completes itself. My question for you is, I got interested in ETs and aliens through your blog post on the phenomena. I'd been primed a little bit by phosphine gas potential results on Venus, Avi Loeb's stuff and Oumuamua, and just Stuart Kaufman's stuff on like self-organization of life. So I was a little bit more and more open to the idea that just statistically life should exist elsewhere. But I think it was your blog post on the phenomena where I was like, what the fuck? If a dude with 180 IQ is like even considering aliens, maybe there's something here. And so it was a frame break for me because I had to actually take it seriously. And then I watched the movie and I thought the evidence was compelling enough. It's been a mind-blowing couple months after that.
Which movie did you watch?
The Phenomena.
Oh, The Phenomenon.
Yeah, your blog post was on that. And then watched a ton of stuff and read a ton of stuff. I guess I have two questions. Hopefully they're related. So the first one is, how did you get interested in aliens or ETs, or even be open-minded enough to spend your time and energy there? And then the follow-up question is, a lot of channeled work that is of pretty good quality. I mean that in the sense that it seems to resonate a lot with deep psychological insights. A lot of it seems to basically be rested on analytical idealism. So I'm curious what you think of this correspondence between basically ET metaphysics and your work, and whether you see that as strong validation or just how does that make you feel? Yeah.
Okay, I'll start from the first question, otherwise I forget it like I did the previous one. My father had a book on UFOs. I mean, my father is a man from the previous century. He was born in 1932. He's dead already. He died in 87. But he lived through the beginning of the UFO phenomenon. He was already a teenager when Arnold in 1947 saw the flying saucers, and this word then stuck. So he had a book on this because he was curious about it. And as a kid, I thought, well, what a fascinating topic, right? One more fascinating topic. That's where the interest started. As I grew up and went to university, I had just turned 17, sort of lost interest. And then later in life, I started having a look at what was going on in the UFO world. And I was disgusted because I thought this is just a morass of gullibility, nonsense, outright lies, scams, and it's so small. They make the whole thing so petty, and I was disgusted with that and walked away. And but at some point, I returned to Jacques Vallée, and I think he is the most sophisticated, subtle, nuanced mind in that field. He's with us still. He's in his 80s. He's still active. He's working on a new documentary as we speak. And for me, he was a sort of the one voice of reason, because he was interested in the evidence and he wouldn't blindly apply the easy story. And the easy story is aliens are living beings from another planetary system that arrived here in a metal, beryllium, whatever spaceship. And that is so bloody petty to limit what is a multifaceted phenomenon that defies not only physics, but logic, Aristotelian logic itself, to try to corral that into this pedestrian story of other beings more or less like us in a metal spaceship of the kind we make, who just wandered about. I think the UFO, UAP, whatever you want to call it, I think that phenomenon has much broader implications than this petty little story. I think there is much more to it. It's alien in the sense that it doesn't fit our categories, but it may not be beyond the earth. Why would we think that we have already mapped and categorized every salient aspect of what happens on this planet? We know logic is arbitrary. You cannot use logic to prove the validity of logic. That's called circular reasoning. So we have to look beyond just the possibility that our notion of physics is incomplete, because it most definitely is. We know it is. But we have to go deeper and wonder if even our Aristotelian logic is just part of it. Maybe nature has more degrees of freedom than the ones captured in Aristotelian logic. And I think that's what the phenomenon is inviting us to do, to think broader, to think beyond our existing categories, to sort of to be iconoclastic when it comes to our logic and our physics and our whole idea about what it means to exist, what it is existence, what is existence, to sort of, break the icons like Nietzsche did, the twilight of the icons, but not the religious icons. The icons of reason and Aristotelic logic need to be not destroyed, but seen in perspective. And that's the important thing, to take a step back from them and see them in perspective and recognize that existence may be more subtle and nuanced than that. And that's what I think makes the phenomenon fascinating. So it's a big turn off for me when somebody stands up and say, you know what, it's just beryllium spaceships from the Pleiades. And I go like, yawn, One, I don't think it is that at all. And two, I would be very disappointed if it were just that. I think it's inviting us to understand that there are more dimensions to being, including our being, than we dare contemplate, than we dare even guess. There's more between heaven and earth than our philosophy would allow us to perceive. So that's the invitation. And we don't heed it. We don't heed the invitation by and large. And it's a pity. Don't know if I answered your questions, but.
You did. Maybe I could say that quick follow-up question. So you're talking about New Age, and so there's this class of work called channeled work. It sounded absolutely schizophrenic to me when I first came across it. It's just like ordinary people who suddenly write profound books, and they say it's because an ET was talking through them. It's very similar to you talking about the Daemon going through you, but this seems so ludicrous to me. So I completely ignored it as a category. But just through some happenstance, somebody recommended a particular book. I read a section of it. And what got me intrigued is I was like, what the fuck? This sounds exactly the same as analytical idealism. And so my willingness to read channeled work was directly proportional to how correspondent I thought it was to your ideas. I'd read and watched a ton of your work. And so I was curious if you've read channeled work, what do you make of this correspondence, and whether you think there's particular validation or insights or anything like that through the synthesis between your work and some of this, like Seth Speaks by Jane Roberts, for example.
Yes, people have pointed it out to me many times. I haven't read it. I will answer your question. Let me preface it by making a confession. Everybody has prejudices. I have them as well. And I find the whole idea of channeling very bad taste. And I instinctively recoil from that. And it is a prejudice because the philosophy I put forward leaves space for that kind of thing. Now, where it's bad taste is how we try to fit that into our categories. If somebody were to say to you, time is a river, you would understand it immediately. You wouldn't laugh of it. You would get it. Of course, time is a river. But is time a river? Of course it isn't. A river is a river. Time is time. So what is it that we say? Of course, it's true, time is a river. What we mean is there is something about a river that is the same as something about time. And then we can even pin this down with a word, both flow. Time is a river because it flows, and then it becomes literal. And then we abandon the metaphor, and we don't say time is a river anymore. We say time flows. That's the literal truth. So why will I appeal to a metaphor? Now, we do this because we know the category, flow. We have the category, we have the word, we have the concept. We don't need the metaphor because we have the conceptual apparatus to go straight to the meaning. But our conceptual apparatus, it's absurd to think that it has evolved enough to capture every salient aspect of nature. There is a lot about nature that we cannot capture in one of our conceptual categories. For those things, the best we can do is to say, time is a river, and there is nothing more to be said about it. You cannot translate that into the literal categories. We don't have them. We don't have the equivalent of flow for the time is a river applied to other aspects of nature. You see what I mean? But because we live in a culture that does not accept that you stop at time is a river, because obviously time is not a river, what people do when they sense these other things is they will squeeze it into some existing category. And then you get to, I channeled it from a dead spirit. Do you see what I mean? To channel it from a dead spirit is a surrender to the need to go beyond just time is a river. We don't have the flow for that. We don't have the concept, but we squeeze that into the nearest concept. And we end up saying something literally untrue. Why? Because we felt the need to literalize it. While we can't, because we do not have the conceptual armor to literalize everything that is salient, everything that is relevant. Why would we? Well, our species exists for 200,000 years, and only for the last 50,000 have we evolved symbolic thinking, namely the ability to reflect and conceptualize. 50,000 years. It's not even the blink of an eye in the history of this planet. It's not even the blink of an eye in the history of life in this planet, which is 3.5 billion, maybe 4 billion years old. Why would we imagine that we have the categories to literalize everything? But we are in a culture that does not accept that we stop at time is a river. So we squeeze that felt intuition of a broader reality, which is very present, very concrete, very real. We squeeze that into an inadequate category. And Jane Roberts channeled Seth, a dead spirit from, I don't know what, Atlantis, whatever it was. I don't know the whole literalization story. So I find that bad taste, if you know what I mean. I wish people stop that time's a river, okay? Don't put an explanation around it. You sensed through the roots of your being, which we all share, because we are rooted in nature. We are manifestations of nature. We are not separate. We are rooted deep down in the underlying reality of everything. Because we have that, we can sense things through our roots. And the metaphor with the tree is perfect because thoughts are here, it's high up in the tree, and the roots are on the other extreme. Thoughts abstract and separate, and the roots are felt intuition. So you felt through your roots, even though you have no conceptual education, you felt through your roots the essence of your own self and the essence of nature itself. And you sensed that so well, you could write an enormous book about it, which has a lot to write. But then you wrapped it in the um, um, time is flow, except that you didn't have the equivalent of flow. So now you have, Seth, that guy from Atlantis, just told it to me. Yeah, that's where I think things become of a bad taste, if you know what I mean. And I mean taste in the sense of preference, not in the sense of flavor. But if you can see past that, if we can sort of refine that diamond by cutting away the rough rock around it, the rough rock that culture sort of forced that one person to wrap it around in order to gain some imagined acceptance, it worked the other way around. It just made her less taken seriously. But culture and ego forced her to sort of squeeze that inconceivable perception, literally inconceivable perception, into whatever conceptual categories she had, which were completely inadequate, but she felt forced to do that. If you can see past that rough rock that was embedded by her ego because of the pressures of culture, then I'm sure you can find something of tremendous value in there, which shouldn't be surprising, because you see, truth isn't fragile. We are living in it. We may not be able to say what it is, but we are it, right? We exist. We are the truth. We may not know how to articulate it in concepts in a way that does justice to it, but we are it, and we are rooted in it. It's all around. It's the only thing that exists. Everything else is a conceptualization of you, and you are true. Whatever you are, whatever the world is, it is what is. It's not fragile. It's right there. You are it. Everything around you is an expression of what is true. So is it surprising that an uneducated person was able to connect with the diamond, the ebb and flow of truth, which is planted into, rooted into, because she is part of that ebb and flow? Is it surprising she could do that? Not the least surprising, not the least.
I really like how you caution against prematurely collapsing the mystery. I think it's a good point you always make with other things, including psychedelic experiences. So yeah, I really appreciate that.
I need to take a bio break because we are going to
Oh,
go
okay,
for another
yeah.
half hour. So give
Well,
me 1 minute.
Okay,
I'll
yeah,
be
sure.
right back,
Sure.
okay? Because
Sure.
I just drank 1 liter of water.
Oh, yeah, please. So yeah, everyone, we're just going to have one more question, and then I'm going to tag in Peter. So I have two guys here, people here, sorry, that I have on the list to ask a question. I'm just going to flip a coin and select one of these people. All right, so Marcus, when Bernardo comes back, if you want to ask your question.
Sure.
All right, when he comes back, yeah.
Thank you, Carlos.
Yeah.
So how are you vibing with what's being said so far, Khalil?
Oh no, yeah, it's great. I mean, there's so many other things I want to talk to him about the more technical aspects of analytical idealism, but it's been really fun. I enjoyed it a lot. I'll probably look back to it afterwards, but it's been fun. Thanks, Peter, man. Thanks, bro.
Thank you, man. You're the one that suggested, I think, Bernardo to come on and the session title.
Some thank. You're welcome, guys. Thanks, Reid. But yeah, thanks everyone for coming just prematurely while he's, in the bathroom. So many people.
I think this is a first, trying to kill time during a bathroom.
Yeah. We kept him for too long, I guess.
I should have like a peace song, just like, on the...
I'm back.
Oh, welcome back. Yes. So we're just going to have one more question, and then I'll tag Peter back in. So the question is going to be from Marcus.
Yes, thank you, Khalil. Thank you, Khalil and Bernardo. So my question goes to your earlier comments about negotiating with or talking to your daemon. And my question goes to the tools we have to do that. And you also implied earlier, and you said elsewhere, that there is no universal morality, that morality is grounded in our current state of alterdom, but it's not universal or fundamental. And my question is that really the case? Because when I think about your concept of universal consciousness that is prior to what we have in our current state of mind, doesn't that the oneness and the unity you talk about in analytical idealism of that basic consciousness that we all share and that where we come from, that unity, doesn't that oneness imply a morality? Another word for that is love, in the Christian sense, not in the erotic or romantic sense, but love, the opposite of fear and building borders and separation between us, but coming together as one, which is also sort of the experience you've talked about in near death or in dying or in other altered states. Does that fundamental consciousness, the ground of all being, does that not imply a morality? And then it's just a question of how do we apply it and interpret it? And aren't our moral rules that we have right now and our laws just more or less successful or failed attempts at getting to that, to the ultimate morality? So that's, hope that was clear.
I don't think there is a book somewhere in nature where the ultimate moral code has been written and exists independent of us. Because morality is the outcome of passing value judgments. In other words, deciding what's good and what's bad, what's welcome and what's not welcome, what's preferred and what's not preferred. And to pass a value judgment, you have to be able to reflect, which requires the ability to metacognize. So it demands a higher level mental function beyond just raw experience. You need to be able to step out of yourself as an experiencer and contemplate your own experiences in order to pass value judgment on them. If you're not metacognitive, pain is not bad and orgasm is not good. They just are. For you to be able to say pain is bad, you cannot be just experiencing the pain, because without metacognition, there is only the experience of pain. So you are the pain. At that moment, that's what you are. You are the experience of pain. And if you're having an orgasm, then you are the experience of orgasm. But we don't say, I am the pain, I am the hunger, I am the sadness, I am the love. We say, I feel pain, I feel hunger. I am the one who has the pain. I am the one who loves. This is metacognition. You stepped out of your experience, and from the outside, you said, I am the subject experiencing the pain. Now, you need that to pass value judgment, because otherwise you are the pain. So the pain is not good, it's not bad, it's just what is the case. It is what obtains. It is the state of affairs of things. There is no value judgment being passed at all. You need to be able to take that metacognitive step back out of your own experience, identify yourself with the agency that has the experience, and then say, I like that, or I don't like that, or I think this is good, or I don't think this is good. And you need to be able to abstract so much that you need to be able to recognize other subjects as equivalent to you. So if I don't like pain, then my neighbor probably doesn't like it either. Therefore, I shouldn't inflict pain on him. So all of these are metacognitive capacities that, insofar as we know, only humans are capable of routinely. Maybe some of the other higher animals, elephants, cetaceans, the higher primates, maybe they have some capacity for that, but not as much as we do. Metacognition is what really sort of separates us from the rest of nature. So insofar as you need that to speak of morals, then morals were not there etched in stone anywhere in the universe before we developed the capacity to create morals through value judgment. Now, in saying that, I'm not demeaning value judgments. I'm just saying that we are responsible. I don't think there is a metacognitive God who wrote a book of morals and passed it on to us. I think the buck stops here at us. And I think that's what we have to be cognizant of. We are the only game in the whole of nature, the only thing in the whole of nature that's capable of passing value judgments. So we are invested with the responsibility for the whole of nature to decide what is okay and what's not okay. Without us, nature is incapable of doing that. So it will suffer at its own hands. If you act instinctively, you never maximize for what you might consider to be good if you're able to metacognize. You stumble around and you cause pain to yourself. It's like, you're waking up suddenly in the morning with your alarm clock and you fall off your bed. It's because your consciousness was not sharp enough to prevent that harm from happening to you. So you did that to yourself. And nature does it to itself all the time. Your backyard is a bloodbath, tremendous suffering, ants cutting up earthworms in pieces. Nature is falling off the bed all the time and harming itself. We have the responsibility to see that, to recognize it explicitly through metacognition and say, but I don't want this to be like that. We are invested with that moral responsibility, which I think is gigantic. And it means that we have to act accordingly. We cannot just check out and say, well, it's nature doing it. No, I'm just a part of nature, so I'll do nothing about it. No, no, no. We are the element of nature that has been invested with the responsibility to take notice and steer things in the way of the good. But it's our judgment. And we better be good at it. And if we are not, we better improve it. And so the reason I think this realization is important, it's because it does away with the idea that morals are fixed. Because then you don't take responsibility for improving them. You will never leverage our capacity to become mature and letting our maturity, our growing maturity, be reflected on our understanding of value judgments, on what we perceive to be the correct morals. If you say morals exist out there, then they don't change. Or at least they don't change because you matured, because you became more conscious, because you empathize better with people. And it's this whole discussion of this transcendent, ultimate, unchangeable moral set of rules that leads to abnormalities like a criminal justice system that is effectively based on revenge, which is insane. No, to think that we have a criminal justice system because people need to be punished is insane. What the hell are people talking about? Do you think that if a criminal felt and thought like you, he would have committed an act that you would never have committed? Of course not. He committed that act because other potentialities of humanness have manifested through him. And under those circumstances, he did the only thing he could do. He committed a crime. If you understand that, the whole notion of punishment falls off the table. So why do you lock people up? To punish them? No. You lock people up because they may not be trustworthy to continue to engage in the social contract. And if they're not trustworthy, that threatens the social contract. And that could make all of our lives a lot less efficient because we need to operate based on some degree of trust. If I drive on the highway, I need to trust that the other guys will stay on their lanes and not cut me off or T-bone me. I need to be able to have that trust. If somebody has T-boned other people, I hope he will be removed from the highway so I can continue to trust the highway. Another reason we lock people up is deterrence. It works as a deterrence, which is important. Deterrence, the fear of punishment, the fear of losing your freedom is a new variable, a new circumstance that can swing the actions people actually take. So deterrence is a valid reason. A preemption is a valid reason. Actually, deterrence is only valid insofar as it helps preempt. But punishment and vengeance are insane. But if you look at the good book, the Old Testament, it's enshrined in the moral book. It's an eye for an eye, friend. So should we take that as the ultimate, independent from us set of rules? I think that's irresponsible. I think we are the entities responsible in the whole of nature for moral judgment, and we have to let it go hand in hand with our ability to mature and become more conscious and understand that the evil that manifests through others could very, very well manifest through us if we found ourselves under the same circumstances.
Thank you.
Interesting. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about Jung's response to Job, but yeah, I think we have to wrap up here, Peter.
Yeah, we should close out soon, but Bernardo, any closing thoughts you'd like to leave us on anything that's been spoken about today?
Well, I'll take the hint from the question from Khalil. Khalil, not Khalil, Khalil, yeah. Jung's answer to Job is a fascinating short little book that everybody should read, at least I think, because it shows you that God, and now I'm talking like time is a river, okay? I will be speaking the language of time is a river now. I'm not going to bother to literalize it through our limited conceptual dictionary. And that's how Jung wrote that book, by the way. In Jung Answers to Job, God is incapable of passing reliable moral judgment because God cannot metacognize. So Job finds himself in a situation in which he needs God's help against God. And Job is a harbinger of what would happen with Jesus, the incarnation of God in the temporal world. He's a harbinger of that because Job is a figure that not only causes a sort of an explicit acknowledgement by God that he's not metacognitive. I mean, the rant that God goes into at the end of his dialogue with Job, like, who do you think you are? I am the one behind the storms. And he's basically saying, I am nature. That's what he's saying. And God is saying, I am nature. And the message is, I don't metacognize. I just am. And Job was the first aspect of mind that put a mirror in front of God. Oh yeah, you just are. So here is what happens when you just are. And what happens is Job lost his children, lost his crop, lost his possessions, lost his health, lost everything, and basically was tortured for a long time, although he was a righteous man. So this is a tiny aspect of consciousness, powerless in front, before the immensity, the monstrosity of God. And I don't say monstrosity in a negative way, I say it in a morally neutral way. A tiny aspect of mind, totally powerless in front of the immensity of the divinity, telling the divinity, there is such a thing as a bad move. And you realize that if you reflect. And of course, that whole thing was it came to a whole new level with the incarnation, with the New Testament, with God becoming man and experiencing things from man's perspective. And I'm using the word man instead of humanity because this whole thing is an old-fashioned topic anyway. So the women, please forgive me for this. These are the words Jung uses. And I think that's fascinating because it sort of dovetails with the last question I answered. We are responsible for passing value judgments. And what are we but consciousness incarnate, consciousness dissociated, evolving metacognition, looking at nature and saying, that is good and that is not. We are that.
Thank you. At the risk of starting some new stuff up, I'm wondering if aliens are not the meta consciousness. Anyway, but yeah, Peter, you could jump in. Thank you so much, Bernardo. This has been a dream come true, and it's just a delight. So thank you.
It's been a pleasure, Khalil.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Khalil, for hosting the session. And I'll make some closing announcements in a moment. But yeah, to echo Khalil's thoughts, Bernardo, thank you so much for coming to the Stoa. We'd love to have you back. There's a
my pleasure
for it, I think. So if you like this session, you might like this session. We got a lot of cool sessions this week. One, we have Mauricio Laura's Erotic Magic in Mass Media. That's on Thursday. And he's going to talk about his thesis on the origins of psychology, advertising, and modern media, how they arise from erotic magic. And then on Friday, we have ontological flooding with Jack Hunter. Jack is a para-anthropologist, and he does this technique to really embody different ontologies, which is pretty cool. So you can check out more events. We've got tons on the thestoa.ca. You can check out the mailing list and the Patreon if you'd like to support us. So that being said, Bernardo, everyone, thank you so much for coming to the Stoa today.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. Take care, everybody.